Hey everyone, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard the Lighthouse Within with Ambar Paloma, but you can also call me Amber. Today's topic comes highly requested. Uncertainty. I think we can all relate to being in a season of our lives where a plan has fallen apart and you don't know what comes next. Or maybe you find yourself in one of those in between phases. Nothing is exactly ending, but nothing is exactly starting either. And these moments can cause us so much anxiety. So, how do we handle these seasons without absolutely exploding? Let's get into it. If this is your first time at the Lighthouse Within, I'm so happy you decided to join me. We are on the ultimate voyage to resilience. This podcast is all about navigating seasons of change and uncertainty to make your best pivots yet. Or, in layman's terms, next time you're overwhelmed by a life transition, I want you to have the skills and mindset to know you're going to make it through with something even better on the other side. So last time we started an epic side quest where I said I was going to spend a few weeks convincing you to stop pursuing happiness, which is a bold claim to make, but my friends, I am standing 10 toes down on it because what I want you to pursue instead is joy. We talked about the difference between joy and happiness last week. Happiness is a feeling based on our circumstances. That's why we have such famous expressions like happiness is fleeting. But joy is an attitude that defies your circumstances. We also talked about how the deepest layer of change lies in your identity, your mindset, and your attitudes. So if you are just changing your habits, but you don't change your mindset will eventually sabotage your efforts to change. And finally, we talked about the ways a gratitude practice can help rewire your brain to be more solution-oriented. So this brings me to today. Because while I enjoyed the last episode, somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard myself say, well, yeah, Amber, joy sounds great when everything is relatively okay, but what about when the rug gets pulled out from underneath you? What about when you make the perfect plan and you arrive to it and you're miserable? What about when everything feels like it's falling apart around you and you don't know what comes next? What about then? And as always, my friends, I have a little story time for you. This is the story of my quarter life crisis. And honestly, it is one of my favorite stories ever. Although my 25-year-old self would not agree with me, but that's just because she doesn't know the ending of this story yet. Some context for this story. I grew up the child of two incredibly hardworking immigrants. And honestly, they taught me a lot about resilience through their immigrant journey. But they also taught me a lot about struggling. There were times in my childhood where both my parents worked two full-time jobs just so we could afford living in a nice neighborhood so I could go to a good school and have a good future. My parents couldn't always give me everything, but they gave everything they had to give me an opportunity. And as a kid on my way to school, my dad would often give me the same lecture. I remember I was 6 and I was quite the little jokester. So eventually I started giving him the lecture and I would get into the car and I would buckle my seatbelt and I would start to say, Papi, remember you have to pay attention in class. And if you don't remember something, raise your hand to ask questions. And Papi, remember, you have to be at the top of your class. You always have to be number 1, 2, or 3 in the class. And Papi, remember, me and your mom both have 2 full-time jobs so that you can only have 1. And that's to get a scholarship to a good university so that one day you can have a stable job or you can afford to take holidays off and spend Christmas with your family. And that was my big dream. I watched my parents struggle through the 2008 recession. I watched them struggle through strokes and anxiety as they worked to give me a chance. So I got that scholarship and I worked hard all of university, doing internships, part-time jobs, volunteer opportunities, and finally I finished my master's degree with distinction. Finally, it was time to live the stable life I had worked for. I was going to have Christmas off and I was going to spend it with my family. I remember at the time I was around 24 and I was dating someone it felt very serious with. We agreed to move to Atlanta together and I felt like I was getting everything I ever wanted. I got the exact apartment in the exact neighborhood I dreamed of moving to. I got the exact position at the exact company I dreamed of working at. I did it all with someone I saw a future with. And I finally got that stable job where I could take Christmas off and spend it with my family. But I was miserable. That job was such a toxic environment. I'd come home every day and cry. My social life was completely missing in action, and I had such horrible allergies in the city. I lost my voice multiple times from how constricted my throat was getting. I was constantly sick. The person I moved to Atlanta to be with couldn't find a job, left the city, and then cheated on me. Even my car kept breaking down. I went to the mechanic so often that man knew me by name, okay? I would drive up to the mechanic and he would be like, "Back again, Miss Amber?" And I'd say, "Back again, Willis." He wouldn't even charge me for small things. Like, that's how often I went there. I would come with like a busted light and he'd be like, "Oh, don't worry about it, Miss Amber. It's just a little light bulb. You call me next time." You know things are serious when the mechanic isn't charging you for repairs. I just remember I was so unhappy. I had gotten everything I ever wanted, and honestly, it sucked. I remember calling my dad one day from work and saying, "Papi, I think I'm too young to be this unhappy." He definitely laughed at me because, as an immigrant who had worked as hard as he did, he couldn't imagine that I would be so unhappy having a stable job where I could take holidays off. I remember one day I was complaining to my older and wiser coworker, and she goes to me, "Amber, you're always saying how much you love Spain. Why don't you just go teach English in Spain or something?" And I was like, "Stephanie, I can't quit my life and move to Spain. I'm the child of immigrants. Are you kidding me? I am living their wildest dream. I have a stable job. I can spend Christmas with my family." Now, Stephanie understood because she was also the child of immigrants. She tells me, "Why not? You're young, you aren't married, you don't have any kids. When else will you be this free to make a completely selfish decision? Just think about it." So that night I went home and I looked up teaching English in Spain, and there's several options, but I specifically came across the program for CIEE, and I looked at it. I entertained the thought for a second and I was like, "Oh, no, I can't do this. It's too crazy." And I closed the page. Then I opened up Facebook. Back in the day when millennials used to use that. I opened Facebook and the first status I see, I kid you not, says, "Hey, has anyone ever been to Andalusia in Spain?" And I comment, "Yeah, why do you ask?" He tells me, "Oh, I just got accepted to teach English in Spain through CIEE's program." Now, friends, I don't know what you believe in, okay? I don't know if you believe in God. I don't know if you're one of those universe people. I don't know if the only thing you believe in is ridiculously strange coincidences. But I 1000% decided this was a sign. And I applied to that program. I got accepted. I sold everything to my name except my rabbit and my original hardcover copies of Harry Potter. And I quit that job that was draining me. I left Atlanta and I moved to Spain. Actually, with that friend. That was about 6 years ago, and I never moved back. Recently, I was on a trip back home to visit my family, and it was so amazing seeing my family and reconnecting with old friends all over the United States. So if you're one of those friends and you reached out to me because you saw me on an Instagram story being in your city, thank you so much for reaching out. You made that trip absolutely memorable. But one of the things that really stuck with me, like a really defining core moment that truly altered my brain chemistry, I was standing in New York City. just a few blocks down from the building where my family first moved when they immigrated to the United States. I was looking all around me, and I remembered how desperately I wanted to move there at one point in my life. And the following thought flooded me from head to toe, and I said to myself, wow, I am so deeply grateful that I did not get the life I used to dream of. Because the life I had never dared to consider has turned out to be so much more fulfilling than anything I had ever planned. It's only now at 32 that I can look at those things and say, I would have never bloomed in this environment. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. That man would have drained the best parts of me. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. I would have never thrived in that city. I didn't see it then, but I see it now. That career would have never fulfilled me. I didn't see it then, but my God, how I see it now. I would have been settling in that life. The irony of certainty is how we try to chase it and bottle it up into our future plans. But certainty only comes with the past. And I remember standing there surrounded by the hustle and bustle of New York City, while men in chic suits walked hurriedly to important places on their way to talk to important people. And I remember thinking, may I remember the next time I put together a perfect plan and I watch it fall apart piece by piece in front of my eyes, that the life I never planned is substantially better than any plan I ever made. Earlier this year, I read a quote in the book 101 Essays That Will Change the Way You Think. It goes a little something like this. You believe that creating your best life is a matter of deciding what you want and then going after it. But in reality, you are psychologically incapable of being able to predict what will make you happy. Your brain can only perceive what it's known. So when you choose what you want for the future, you're actually just recreating a solution or an ideal of the past. In other words, the only thing you can be certain of is what has made you happy in the past. But you can't predict what will bring you happiness in the future. While you might have general ideas about what you want, having your life all figured out can be misguided. For one, let's be real. What you desire may not actually be good for you, right? The mark of youth, I think, is believing that you can have it all figured out. But as Socrates said, true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. This is why I'm skeptical about things like manifesting. And I know some people use that just to say working towards, but some people use this to call things into their life that might not be good for them. Now, you can do whatever you want, but be cautious about what you quote unquote manifest. Because if you believe you've manifested something or someone into your life, you might struggle to walk away when it proves to be harmful to you. You might think you just need to push through and make it work because you quote unquote manifested it. Even worse, if what you manifested is rooted in your current limitations, you may end up settling for something that isn't right for you in the long run. There's another reason why having it all figured out doesn't make sense. You don't know everything that's possible in the future. What was possible 10 years ago is different from what is possible today. And what may be possible in 10 years might not be available right now. So how can you expect to have your entire life mapped out when you don't know what opportunities await you? Now, I totally get that thought can be really overwhelming, especially if you are someone who struggles with anxiety. But I invite you to free yourself from the burden of even having to figure out anything beyond your current season of life. It's impossible to know everything that lies ahead. And the third most important reason, what will make you happy is constantly evolving, because hopefully, so are you. The more you grow, the more you heal, the more you align internally, the more the definition of happiness will shift for you. That's why it's tricky to hold on to the idea of pursuing happiness. because what made me happy at 21 does not make me happy at 32. And if I had gotten stuck with the life I thought I wanted at 25, well, I think I would be miserable and probably divorced by now. That therapy check would be thick, like THICC thick. However, when we focus on joy, on the attitude that defies our circumstances, we can say, I have everything I need inside me to reach for a new dream, to reach for new opportunities, to make it through this season. So again, don't even bother trying to have it all figured out. Instead, focus on being present in this chapter of your life and allow the rest of your story to unfold with each new season. I would absolutely be remiss, my friends, if I didn't tell you that these moments of uncertainty can come with grief too. Every single stage of it. The denial, the anger, the bargaining, the depression, all of it. I think sometimes we think grief is something you experience when someone passes away, but grief is the anguish you feel after any significant loss. That loss can be a job, it can be a relationship, it could be your home, it could be a friend, it could be the life you thought you were going to live, it could be the future you thought you had with that person, it could even be the person you used to be before it all fell apart. Now, grief looks different for everyone, but I want you to know that it's okay to grieve. Because if you move through your grief in a healthy way, you will get to the last stage of grief, which is acceptance. But you have to feel it, process it, and let it go so you can get there. We talked about how to do that in the 3rd episode, so you can always refer back to that if you need it, along with the Emotional First Aid Kit ebook from that week that will help you release and regulate your emotions at the mind, body, and spirit level. So check that out. And if you want resources like this sent straight to your inbox, remember to sign up for my newsletter, Message in a Bottle. I am always reading something. So I was recently reading a book called The Book of Joy, and they talk about the Buddhist concept of, I feel like I'm about to mispronounce this. I am very sorry if you are Buddhist. I want to say possibly dukkha. I'm not sure. Anyways, according to this Buddhist concept, it says that so much of what causes heartache is our wanting things to be different than they are. Recently I had this revelation that the reason I used to try to control everything around me was because I struggled to control the anxiety inside of me. And when I got a better handle of my reactions and my mindset, things going wrong around me stopped bothering me as much. So let's talk about that part, because I know you might be sitting there thinking, damn, Amber, I thought this was a conversation about joy. Part of why I shared that reflection about me in New York is because I think every time we are faced with uncertainty, we seem to forget that we've totally been through uncertain moments before and made it out alive. Like, sometimes you make it out even better than when you went through it initially. Like, if you are listening to this right now, you are still in this race. You are still in this race called life, my friend. You might be sprinting to the finish line. You might be walking to the finish line. You might be crawling to the finish line, barely making a move forward. At least that's how you feel. But you are still in this race. I remember a few weeks before I launched this podcast, a friend asked me if I felt insecure about doing it. And I was like, no, I'm having like the best time. But the night before I published, I went into full-blown panic mode. All of a sudden, every fear came up in my mind, and I was faced with the reality like, oh wait, I don't just have to make the podcast. I need to find people to listen to it. And suddenly I couldn't sleep, looking at Instagram growth tips like I'm not literally a social media marketer. But I remembered my own words from episode 2 on anxiety, and I was like, yeah, this is 100% anxiety. And I need to tell it to take a back seat to my intuition, who is very much saying, it's okay. Keep working, and it will come with time. Now, on some level, let's have a little reality check. You will have some anxiety and stress in your life. That's inevitable. That's because they're important signals your body sends you to keep you safe. They tell you when you're in a situation you might have to leave. Now, when it comes to having had experienced trauma, your anxiety signals can be extra sensitive. So please take that into account. And if you feel like that's something you would like to work on, please reach out to a therapist for additional support. The real question isn't, however, how do we avoid ever feeling anxiety again? It's how do we handle it and how can we keep it from overwhelming us? And if you want help with that, please go back to episode 2 and 3, 2 being on intuition versus anxiety, and number 3 being on managing your emotions. There's a very real neurological process going on in your brain when you're faced with uncertainty. Remember last episode we talked about neurons that fire together, wire together. So the more you turn to a specific action when you are faced with a situation, the more it will become your default setting. So on some level, we need to be careful about what action we're taking when we're faced with this, because we can really just be reinforcing the behavior. The second thing is that our brains love predictability, which is why we do too. But there is nothing predictable about uncertainty. So this naturally triggers your amygdala, which then triggers your fight or flight mode. So how do we counteract this? The first thing you need to do is find a way to signal to your brain that you are safe. There's 3 things that I personally love doing when I am in a moment of panic. And the first thing is to find a quote or maybe a scripture that brings me peace. I also like to remind myself about another time I have made it through a hard situation and made it out even better than before. And my third tool, okay, my friends, this one's a little unorthodox, but I will start making gratitude statements. I'm not even kidding. I know that sounds crazy, but your brain cannot effectively process anxiety and gratitude at the same time. That's because these 2 emotional states activate different neural pathways in the brain, and they tend to counterbalance each other. Studies show that focusing on gratitude increases the production of neurotransmitters like serotonin and dopamine, which improve mood and foster positive feelings. And because of that, they crowd out anxious thoughts and push them out of your brain. It also reduces your cortisol, also known as the stress hormone. So I know it sounds incredibly crazy. I will literally be in the middle of a situation where I feel like I'm about to panic or like go into full-blown anxiety and be like, okay, I'm grateful that the weather's really nice today. I'm grateful that I have tons of friends and family that I can always call who support me. I'm grateful that I have money in my bank account in case I need to pay for something to get out of the situation. And I will just like do that until I like move through the situation. And it does calm me down little by little. I know it's unorthodox, but this is backed by science. The other reason is gratitude also helps reframe your perception of the situation. We talked about this in the last episode. Instead of focusing on what is going wrong, you start appreciating what is going right or what you have available to you and how what you have can help you get through the situation. So, as I said, unorthodox, but neurologically backed. So here is my 3-step reference sheet I want you to create and keep somewhere where you can always find it for moments where your stress is high in the face of uncertainty. This is going to be part of this episode's worksheet in the show notes as well, if you would like to have that. So you can make this in like your notes app or even a little piece of paper that you put in your wallet or your purse or anything like that. Create a note that has the following. At the top, I want you to put comfort quotes that remind you that it's going to be okay. This can be quotes from your favorite authors or leaders. It can be a saying one of your mentors always says to you, or if you are spiritual, include some verses from your spiritual texts that bring you peace and comfort. But I don't just want you to pick any quote, okay? When you read it, I want you to have the following feeling, okay? Here it is. Yeah, I needed to hear that. That's the parameter, okay? Don't give me anything less. Underneath that, I want you to start a collection of times that you went through uncertain or difficult moments and made it. Okay, maybe even made it out better than you expected. And I want you to keep that somewhere you can reference so you can remember that you can and have made it through hard things. And underneath that, when you're in a good headspace, I want you to write a little love note to your future self, reminding you that you are going to be okay. So we talked about grieving the loss. And again, you can go back to that third episode and the emotional first aid kit if you want support with your emotions. We also talked about calming ourselves down when we're literally in the thick of it. Now I want to talk about the third phase, but only come to this phase when you're ready. Because if you aren't ready, it might feel dismissive. But when you're ready, it will transform your life. When you're ready, I want you to ask yourself this. If I could see this as an opportunity, what is this an opportunity for? Why? One of the reasons uncertainty feels so horrible is because we feel out of control. Reframing this as an opportunity gives you back your sense of control. 2, when you can frame painful experiences as stepping stones or catalysts for personal growth, it becomes easier to cope and reach acceptance. When you believe everything is happening for your benefit, it's easier to cope with. And 3, it reduces your hopelessness and gives your life meaning. In the Book of Joy, Archbishop Desmond Tutu said that suffering can either embitter us or ennoble us, and that the difference lies in whether we are able to find meaning in our suffering. So, you feel miserable at work? Maybe this is an opportunity to pivot into something more fulfilling. You got your heart broken? Maybe this is an opportunity to find a more compatible relationship. You were betrayed? Maybe this is an opportunity to find more loving friends. People keep taking advantage of you? Maybe this is an opportunity to learn to set boundaries. Heck, you're dealing with wave after wave after wave of situations where you don't know what comes next. Maybe life is giving you an opportunity to reassess what actually matters to you, and if this is the life you want to be living. We can look at the moments when life falls apart as a curse sent to break us, or we can look at it as a lesson sent to train us for our next level in life. So when we choose to turn lemons into lemonade, struggles into strength, pain into purpose, it's not just some catchy phrase. It's the key to resilience. Now, I've gotten some feedback from people that the worst part of uncertainty is the waiting. And I think I could make a whole episode just on waiting. That anticipation where you're making moves, but nothing is either ending or starting. And I totally get that. There are a lot of reasons this happens at the psychological level, but part of it is anxiety and a loss of control. The more we look to the future, the more anxiety comes to play. So I invite you to stay rooted in the present and reclaim control by seeing this in-between time as also being an opportunity. Before you start the next chapter, is there something you want to accomplish? Maybe finally reorganize something in your home, enjoy some much-needed rest, take a trip somewhere that's been on your bucket list, reconnect with an old hobby you haven't had time for. Or maybe this is an opportunity to take a step back and reassess what really matters. What do you want this next chapter to look like? Now, this would not be an episode of The Lighthouse Within without a final message. So, if you are ready, please close your eyes and place your hand over your heart and take a deep breath with me. Inhale, hold, and exhale. Now, with your hands still over your heart, please receive this message. In those moments when you don't know what comes next, when the dream you held onto for so long gets pulled out from underneath you, when the job falls through, when the relationship falls apart, when the thing you thought you wanted most takes you in the wrong direction, and you're being faced with the darkness of not knowing what's next. How beautiful is it that in the midst of the darkness, you can always decide to turn on the light and dream a new dream. That life keeps giving you moments to think bigger, to dream better, and to reach for a more fulfilling life. How beautiful is it that life slams doors in your face so you can finally knock on the ones you were meant to. In those moments of uncertainty, you have a blank canvas to write your best story yet. And I pray you look back on this moment and see that it was the turning point that took you to the place you couldn't even imagine dreaming of before. You can open your eyes now. If you liked this episode, please leave a comment or rating or both, okay? And go ahead and follow so you can always know when new episodes drop. And tune back in next time for a conversation on negative self-talk. What to do when your biggest source of negativity and criticism is your own mind. By the way, friends, with the new year coming up, I'm thinking of doing a series at the top of the year around resolutions and goals. I will be breaking down some of the resilient skills we need to be in the driver's seat of making the changes we want to see in our lives. So please stay tuned for that and make sure that you're following the show so that you always know when new episodes drop. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm hoping you don't get the life you dreamed of. I hope you get something much better. Something more fulfilling, more peaceful, more nourishing, and more joyful. Have a fantastic day.